Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is an old colleague. Gemma Files was a film critic for Eye Weekly back in the 90s when I was writing for the Toronto Star. She's gone on to become an award-winning horror author and screenwriter. Her latest collection of short stories, In That Endlessness, Our End, was published earlier this year. Gemma picked The Borderlands, which was released in North America as Final Prayer. It's a 2013 found-footage horror movie starring Gordon Kennedy and Robin Hill as two mismatched professionals sent to a church in the British West Country by the Vatican to debunk stories of mysterious events in the building, only to find a situation that defies all rational explanation. If you've never heard of it, that's okay. It was barely released in North America, the new title didn't help, and writer-director Elliot Goldner only made the one dramatic feature. He mostly works in television documentary. But actually that turns out to be more of a feature than a bug here. This is Someone Else's Movie.
When I first said that I wanted to be a screenwriter way back when, and people asked me what kind of movies I wanted to make, I said, well, I want to make horror movies. And they'd say, what, like Friday the 13th? And I'd say, no, like Hellraiser. And nobody knew what that meant. Yeah. That tells you how long ago that was, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, I've lived with it long enough because I've been doing this for almost 30 years, basically, you know? I've lived with it long enough to be able to say horror is a spectrum of effects and it's a spectrum of emotions. And one of the things that I like about it is that it handles some of the most human emotions ever. Not just pain or the threat of pain, not just fear or the threat of fear for yourself or other people, but also, darkness, depression, a sense of foreboding, a sense of shadow, a realization that life is sweet because it ends. A realization that you didn't know how good you had it. And now you're suddenly in a situation where you're like, oh shit, Yeah. And even a sort of awe and a terror that is almost numinous, is almost that moment of the God appearing to you.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that I really want people to explore, and they never seem to in horror films where literal Satan is involved, where the devil is around. Doesn't that mean God exists? Don't Joss Whedon it and tell me God's absent and letting us fight for ourselves. That's fine.
Supernatural. All angels are assholes, and God is a paperback writer.
Yeah, an absentee landlord, to quote the other guy. But those are fun. I have nothing against them, but this came up on an episode of I Hate It, But I Love It, where Jocelyn Getty and Kat Angus had me on as the guest to talk about Shyamalan's Signs. And that movie fascinates me because if you believe its premise, God is real and they're going to see their dead mom again, like that, or dead wife again. That there is a whole different level of storytelling that's just on the side, just off the frame.
And the faith is useful, one way or the other. That faith is not a waste of your time. That having faith is not a waste of your time, and which I find fascinating because we live in an age where I don't know, it's an age of like fakery and debunkery and this idea that nothing kind of means anything. People just lie and nobody cares because we've been lied to 1,000 times before, and I don't understand how, on the political side of things, how people can be so upset and angry about stuff and yet not apparently give a shit about anything. It's like, and just laugh at people when they're like, you are completely making me feel like total shit by denying me my identity and denying me my rights and denying me my history. And they're just like, yeah, well, whatever, cry harder, libs.
Right.
You're just like, well, why should I care about your whatever? Why should I care about your supposedly sacred stuff? There is this sort of sense, and, yeah, there's a school of horror, which is about some bad thing comes from the outside and we meet it and everything is okay after that. It's like things were normal and okay, and then they got bad, and then we got back to the normal. But even in something like Poltergeist, which really, really seems like that kind of restorative horror, that kind of heteronormative horror, that kind of, normative horror.
Yeah.
Um,
Family challenge, family wins.
Yeah, exactly. They're still not going to have a TV in the room with them for probably the rest of their lives. Because if nothing else, they know that the world is not the way that they thought it was. And that's an intrusion of something larger. And, maybe it's sacred, maybe it's physical, it could be parallel dimensions, it could be, ultrasound, it could be whatever, but, it could be that you're on top of a mountain, which turns out to be something completely different. Yeah. But, but the world is different than you thought it was. You had a very specific idea of the world, and then your mind was enlarged because your experience enlarged you. And I don't think that that's such a bad thing. And the weird part is that that's like the underbelly of horror.
If you survive
the underbelly of horror is, if you survive it. Yeah, if you survive it, it's the underbelly of horror. It shows you what you can survive. It shows you that you can survive knowing terrible things and having your world reordered. It also, sometimes it's not so much, wow, the world has monsters in it. Sometimes it's, wow, I guess I am what people would call a monster, but maybe that's okay. Maybe I am what I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's Clive Barker all over. That's his whole thing, right? Like,
yes,
having mentioned Hellraiser earlier, it absolutely is the embrace your.
Oh, Nightbreed particularly.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm trying to figure out what it is. It's not embrace your inner monster. It's wear your monster on the outside. Yes,
exactly. And, certainly that comes out of being gay. That comes out of, coming of age during the era of AIDS. It comes out of all that. But it also comes out of, it's like there's a heterosexual version of it in Cronenberg, where it's like, body horror is the thing that you think that you can't talk about because it will wreck you, coming out of you literally. And it doesn't wreck you. It just changes you. It just makes you something else.
Mm-hmm.
You saw Possessor?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. I was really, really interested by that. I almost picked that, but I didn't.
Okay. It's a film that I think right up until it goes full conceptual, I was on board. Mm-hmm. And then it just it didn't exactly lose me, but it didn't manage to come back from that for me. It was one of those things where the resolution that Brandon Cronenberg comes up with requires a sort of double-blind fake on the audience that doesn't seem practical, in addition to all the other stuff that's been going on. I don't want to spoil it for the listener, but
no, absolutely. And neither do I.
But the stuff with the kid at the very end, it's like, come on, when did that happen? You just showed me how difficult this is.
And you had a person say that they can't do this anymore. But I guess that shows you how much of an investment she has in X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
At any rate, I think it rewards rewatching. For me,
I'm curious to revisit it actually now that it's showing up on the streaming services. But
absolutely, that idea that the thing inside of you that you think that you can show to nobody because then they will. They're all going to laugh at you. They'll laugh at your dirty pillows and the fact that blood is exploding out of your head and that you can move things with your mind.
Like 5 years later, Carrie would have been an amazing X-Men. She would have been fine. She born in the wrong time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And had she been in the X-Men universe, that would have been an okay backstory. I mean, that's pretty much God, Cannonball's backstory. It's like, I lit myself on fire in the coal mine, and everybody blew up. It's like, oh, God.
So many mutant origin stories are, and I killed a couple of people, but they were bullies.
Yeah, or I killed a bunch of people and I felt terrible about it. And I still feel terrible about it. Yeah. Good for Logan that he can't remember half of his life.
Yeah. All the corpses. It's handy for him.
Yeah.
It's a coping strategy.
Yeah. So, so these are all things that occurred to me as a horror writer. And it's strange because, in the beginning, I didn't particularly think that found footage was going to work as a genre, even as it widened and widened and widened. And the funny part is that you still can't really search for stuff under found footage. You can't just, feed found footage into an algorithm on a streaming service and go, no, I want to watch found footage.
Yeah.
Well, it's a mode. Yeah. Yeah. My husband says it's not really a genre, it's a mode. And, it's like, and a bunch of things fall under that, right? You've got this is taking place right now. So live streaming. Mm-hmm. You've got the most recent idea, which is Timur Bekmambetov's Screen Life.
Right.
Where you're
watching, and then Host
and
just Searching. Now, right? On Searching, that's right, which isn't even a horror movie.
I know, but Searching is a beautiful thriller and actually very moving. And it is Screen Life. It's Screen Life from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have the widening category of docudrama or mockumentary, rather.
Right.
Some of which is docudrama. The Shadow People, for example, which is a lot better than you would think, has sections where it's very obvious that an actor is playing the real guy doing reenactments of things.
Okay.
But, and most recently, Savage Land, which is another film that you should see.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Yeah, Savage Land is fascinating because it's essentially about a guy who lives in a border town in Mexico, or New Mexico, rather. It's like right next to the Mexican border. And he's an illegal immigrant. And he's picked up after a huge wave of murder goes through the town. Like the whole place is cleaned out, essentially. And because he's the only survivor, they're like, well, obviously he must have done it all. And then they find that he's a photographer. That's what he does on his off hours. And they find that he actually shot a bunch of photographs that night. And so you're going through these still photographs and you realize that what he's taking photographs of are zombies. They're very obviously zombies, and everybody's like arguing about it. They're all like, it's like, my son could do that, on his computer, could figure out. It's like one of those deep fakes. Right. It's like, how would this guy know how to deep fake a zombie attack? And meanwhile, the one guy who's fighting really hard to get him out of jail is absolutely convinced that it's actually guys in Halloween masks who went down to Savage Land to kill Mexicans. Okay. It was like white guys in Halloween masks. He's like, yep, it's happened before and it's going to happen again. And you're like, it's zombies, man. The main guy is like so traumatized he can barely say anything in his own defense, as you would be.
That's a great setup. I'm not aware of this. American film?
American film, and I found it on Tubi.
Cool.
So,
all right. I will go look for it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out a way to hook back because there was something you said about the thing about being forced to confront the fact that the universe is bigger than you believed.
Yes,
which is kind of what the Borderlands is about, but not really, because in the end things are much, much smaller. And both
they're different though.
Yeah.
They're different.
Well, exactly. Both metaphorically and literally.
Nobody's idea of how the universe is exactly correct.
Yeah.
So let's go to the Borderlands.
Yeah. So you have a film here where three characters offering opposing viewpoints, and somehow complementary as well. There are alliances being formed and broken up throughout. Three people show up in a small little place in rural England.
The Borderlands.
Going to the Borderlands.
Probably between England and Wales, I would think.
It looked like it, yeah.
Looked like the Welsh Borderlands.
There's a signature, so dumb, but I know this. There's a signature fence construction that shows up in the Welsh farmland. Mm-hmm. And I thought I caught a couple of glimpses of it. And it's just a couple of the walls that they have near the church. But it
reminded me a lot of Phil Rickman's work. Rickman is a guy who writes horror novels, but he also writes, I guess, thrillers, mysteries that often have a little bit of the supernatural going on in the background, and they're all along the border.
Okay. So. And the story deals with, how can we put it? Catholic debunkery, people who show up to disprove miracles.
Yeah, specifically, they are the Congregation for the Causes of the Saints. They investigate paranormal activity, re-applications for sainthood. Right. And they're called in by Father Krellick, who is the one priest in a very old church, which has just been reopened. It was not quite... desacredized, or whatever you call that.
Oh, I know this. Deconsecrated, yeah.
Deconsecrated. It was not quite deconsecrated, but it was allowed to lie fallow for a long time. In fact, since pretty much the 1800s, like the 1830s or something like that. Mm-hmm. Pretty early. And I think to some degree, because it's kind of hard to get to, you have to go across a cow field to get there. Yeah. as we find out.
Yeah. Which is one of those great subtle horror moments where the place is secluded for a reason, that it's just quietly forgotten or overgrown. And, this is a movie that wears its inspirations pretty much on its sleeve. It immediately, someone just mentions going to look for Edward Woodward, and it's there's some other stuff towards the end that visually references a few other movies specifically, or lovingly, really. But it is the kind of thing that encourages participation. Like it welcomes a sense of the history of these films and the weird Aleister Crowley craziness that happens in behind closed doors in churches where they shouldn't happen. There's an aura of bad in the church.
There is a definite aura of bad, and it's not just about kids break in and drink 40s and spray paint on it every night. It's it just seems like it should have been left alone, and you're not entirely sure why. At least one part of it is probably Norman, so it's very old. Mm-hmm. It's like upwards of 1,000 years old. So, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to go through it beat by beat or anything, but I'm just setting the stage. And the characters are drawn, again, just well enough, right? That by the time the horror arrives, we already have a really good sense of how everyone will react. It's ingenious, right? Because if you have no money, it's the Jaws argument. If the shark doesn't work, you have to care about the people.
Yes.
And you have to build up these three characters. One of them loves rules. One of them loves being angry. And one of them is the young, the atheist, the young tech guy who's just there on the job, who is Robin Hill from Kill List, which it took me about half an hour to recognize. But that's a sort of, you cannot go wrong with these three archetypes, right? You put them in a room and they're immediately in conflict with one another, with or without the devil.
Yeah. And, Deacon, the Scottish priest, the guy who loves being angry. I mean, he is a guy who has obviously been inside the church a long time, and his job is debunking spiritual activity, and it's eaten away at whatever there was of his faith, I think. And, so he's left in a strange place where he's got to be a priest. There isn't really anything else he knows how to do. But I think he does feel like what he does for a living is poisoning his sense of God, his sense that there's God in anything except maybe nature, but not absolutely. It's like, how do people react to God? Well, they cut little holes in their daughter's hands and, to fake having stigmata. And if they die of peritonitis, then they say things like, now you make my girl a saint.
Yeah.
And Mark, on the other hand, who is younger than Deacon, but above him, he is the guy who loves rules. He also absolutely believes in God, but he believes in God in a very structured way. And all the stuff that they get called in on annoys him in a completely different way.
Yeah.
It's the different way of like, what is all this medieval crap? It's like, this is the kind of this is the kind of stuff that keeps people from joining the church in the first place. It's like all this devil stuff and all this, Satan worship and all this, whatever. It's like, no, let's just get into let's just throw the Old Testament away and just keep with the good stuff. And, it's like, that's what I'm looking to do. And then Gray, the tech guy, what's fascinating to me about him is that he is often the person who's arguing for the miracle.
Yeah.
And it's not because he really believes in it, but he's like, yeah, but wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if there was something,
Yeah.
And both of them are like, no, it would be terrible.
Yeah. Well, Deacon and Mark are structured. Well, the reason they're in this story is because of the lines of work that they've chosen, both of which depend on them saying no, that there isn't anything. And that contradiction is the thing that fascinates me in all of these movies where an expert shows up to debunk something and is proven wrong, is what happens when you're proven wrong? What happens when you are presented with inarguable evidence that the thing you don't want to be happening is happening?
Yeah.
And sometimes you get a Godzilla movie where a scientist is really happy and embraces the possibility. And sometimes you get The Exorcist where, oh Christ, we really have a devil. We have a real problem. I guess my favorite moment is in all the Paranormal Activity movies is the scene about 2/3 of the way through the first one where the psychic shows up for a consult and leaves and just like, nope, can't be here. That spoke to the world that film had created so well.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I can't help you. And if I stay, it's just going to attack me.
Yeah.
And, you're doomed. So bye.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
Yeah. And that actor just kills it. Like he's genuinely apologetic and nauseated and scared. And what is it, 90 seconds of screen time and you learn everything about this? He'll be haunted for the rest of his life by not being able to help them. Doesn't matter. He's leaving.
Yeah, he's gotta leave.
And here, of course, you have three characters who just won't go, who just keep pushing because they need to know. And whether they want to prove it wrong or whether they, like Gray, get suckered into the possibilities.
Yeah.
They can't stop.
Or Deacon responding to Gray. And going, on the one hand, I don't want to think that something real is going on. And on the other hand, fuck Mark.
Yeah, it's true. Well, that's what I mean about the three of them being in perfect opposition to each other. They're accidentally egging each other on into this just because of their personality conflicts. Yeah,
exactly. And, there's so many tiny things in this film that are done perfectly. We've gotten kind of used to glitches being shorthand for there's weird shit going on.
Sure, yeah.
But the glitches are choreographed in such a perfect way. It's not like, suddenly that you just, laid something down on the floor and shrugged it all over, to make things appear. It's more like, no, here is where the glitch happens. Here is where the glitch happens. What does that mean? Does that mean anything? And the way that it slides from Father Krellick sort of making something up to get people to come to his church, but what's the reason that he's making something up for people to come to his church? What is actually like, pushing him to make stuff up to come to his church. And then of course what we eventually come to, which is the very interesting moment that it slips into pure folk horror, where it's like, it's not about God and Satan per se, although we do have that horned figure on the the wall underneath the church. But,
they're around. I think it's fair to say, like, this is a universe where there are actual personifications. They're just not in this movie necessarily for very long.
Yeah, but it's much more the idea of, I mean, I particularly love the Exorcist that they bring in. Father Calvino
lovely man.
About how, he is a really lovely man, up until a point, and talking about there's so little we know about some things because the church has been very effective at destroying the knowledge that came before. It's sort of like if you brought in a bunch of conquistadors to try and fight something from, Mexica, Aztec mythology.
Yeah.
And they'd have to be like, sorry, we burned all those things. All the codexes, we just burnt them, and we didn't really learn how to translate them because we were like, it's just demon worship. Fuck it.
Yeah.
It's like, and here, you're dealing with something older, something much older, which is so far away in time from where they are now that they don't even have a name for it. They just have a symbol.
Yeah. Which is something else that is a nice little reversal on the usual, where the experts have hidden knowledge and, the sacred books and all the secrets. It's so much more unnerving to think that these supposed experts just aren't prepared, that they don't know, that they've just been debunking rather than proving.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, when you're dealing with something which has a historical basis, something that gives it more reality is the idea that here's a lacuna. Here's where there should be something, but there's nothing there. And something obviously happened, but we don't know what it was. It's like, that's what keeps the Bell Witch going.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what's that about? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
the ancient, it's the moment in The Ring, in the Verbinski remake of The Ring, where the kid looks at his mother and says, "You helped her?"
Yes.
It's just that one moment of, oh, I see. None of this makes sense. It does. It has a logic, but I was misinterpreting it.
And, exactly. And in the original Ring, the thing about, frolic and brine, goblins be thine.
Right.
Which obviously, it reminded me very much of, you remember when there was the Pearl and the Mandarin, and you used to be able to, go see Hong Kong movies straight from Hong Kong.
Oh yeah, the uncut stuff.
The uncut stuff. They were always subtitled. The subtitles were very weird, but you could always kind of figure out what was going on. But every once in a while, somebody would say something which made no sense at all, and you'd be like, I think that's a joke in Mandarin that got translated into Cantonese and then into English, and you're like, and everyone around you would be like, ha 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 ha, and you'd be like, okay,
clearly it lands for some people.
Yeah, exactly. So frolic and brine, goblins be thine is very much like that for me, where it's sort of like, okay, all right. Another found footage movie that does this extraordinarily well, another Japanese found footage movie, is Noroi the Curse.
I think I've seen that. It's about, 15 years old?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rings a bell anyway.
Yeah. That guy's a kind of fascinating, Shiriashi. And he's kind of fascinating because almost everything he does is found footage. Oh. It's all shot on video, definitely. And I've seen so far 2 films of his that I think are absolutely great, and the rest of them are okay. Definitely Noroi and Okotu, which is almost like a sidequel to Noroi because the guy with the tinfoil hat pops up again.
Okay.
But in both cases, it's like something happened. It was a long time ago. We buried it. And we don't really know what that thing is anymore because everybody was like, no, let's all forget about that. You know, it's like people lived in an area that's under a lake now, and they made a demon, or they made a fetch or something. Like, it was a kind of magic that nobody does anymore. Or is this useful to know this? You know, it's like, maybe it's not, because you can't really do anything about it. Yeah. So it's like you run up against that, you know, that thing that occurs in history where you're like, what happened between here and here? We just don't have any record from that.
Yeah.
And it's like, we know that Ea Nasir used to cheat people, you know, but between here and here in Babylon, we just don't know about anything else.
Yeah, there's just some bones. And, you know, we assume they were left here on purpose. It's runes and relics and all the fun stuff. I mean, and the ultimate revelation in the Borderlands is that there is a sub basement full of horrors that have happened long before, or maybe not that long ago. And
well,
exactly.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, you know, some of the, I would think that if all of those bones dated back to the 1830s or whatever, a lot of them would be gone. But, obviously there's a sort of signal that comes out from this place where it's like, I want you to do this. I want you to, you know, take your kids and, you know, put them in cages and give me their blood and all this and all that. But also, you know, where does this thing come from? And it's this fascinating, almost, I don't know, Alan Moore-like image of the worm under the hill. Mm-hmm. It's like that, you know, it's like, it's not so much a god as some huge kaiju-sized Cthulhu, you know, under creature that possibly can project telepathic, you know, ideas into people. If you're dumb enough to come and squat on its hide for a while, you know, it's like, so Father Krellick, why don't you get people to come to this church? Kids, why don't you get kids to come to this church? Oh, yes, that sounds good. You're God, right? Yes, I am a god. But if you go down far enough, you discover essentially that you're inside the gut of this thing. It's like you crawled up a tapeworm's ass. And thus leading to one of the most horrifying endings that I've ever seen on anything.
Really? It's funny because I had seen Kermode say that it goes somewhere. We talked about this before, like a couple of weeks ago. My big problem with found footage is knowing that nothing can happen until the last 2 minutes. Because if it's found footage, there's a reason someone lost it, and you can't lose it till the end.
Yes.
So it's not that I didn't enjoy it, and it kind of went exactly where I thought it was going to go in the end, because it's just about isolation. Once people go down those stairs, they're not coming out. Yeah. But it didn't strike me as, I guess it's just that I don't have that claustrophobia button, but I was intrigued.
It's the claustrophobia button, but it's also the idea of being melted by stomach acid.
I mean, that's not pleasant. It's not something I look forward to.
It's not pleasant, obviously. It's not something to look forward to. But also, you know, to be frank, I don't want to either be Gray screaming in the dark, you said there was nothing, you said it didn't exist. Yeah. Or Deacon having to, you know, like hold on to Gray's disintegrating hands. And he can't say anything, you know, except, you know, to start doing the Lord's Prayer. And that's about it. You know, it's like there's no, you know, it's one thing to die. It's another thing to die in total despair. And it's another thing to die not being able to console someone that you really have to think that you got killed.
So it's more of it's the existential dread and the collision with hopelessness and not faithlessness exactly, right? Because faith is being confirmed for somebody, just not you. Yeah,
faith is definitely being confirmed for somebody. And to some degree, the fact that, you know, I don't see it as a defeat that Deacon begins to pray at the end.
Mhm.
To some degree, what else is he going to do? He's a priest. But, I think that this moment for him confirms, as you say, that there's something, and therefore there must be something else. It's what that wonderful line from Dusk Till Dawn. Those things straight out of fucking hell. And if there's a hell,
Yeah.
Jacob, it's got to be a heaven. Got to be.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a mean
Yes.
servant of God.
I still like that movie.
So do I.
It's so much fun. And again, one that's about ancient evil sort of bothering the present day in an unexpected fashion.
And a world where your worldview gets enlarged. I remember having it wasn't really an argument. It was more like just a conversation with Roger Ebert, where I said, well, isn't it possible that this is a world where, crime and vampires just exist in the same world and you didn't know it until then? He's like, yeah, I guess you could see it like that. But, I was just enjoying the crime so much. It's like, well, I can't fault you for that. It was good crime.
Yeah, but the fun of From Dusk Till Dawn is now the mashups are baked in, right? So a film doesn't change gears that way anymore.
No.
But I remember being so thrilled when it turned into a monster movie, because what's this title supposed to be otherwise? Of course there's going to be something scary.
Yeah, exactly. And, if it had just stayed a Tarantino-esque, Rodriguez-esque,
hostage picture.
Criminal shenanigans, picture, sure, that would have been fun. But I love the fact that, again, we'd be made to care about those characters, and now they end up in the titty twister.
Yeah.
Getting ground down like fine chunk.
Sometimes a movie just knows what people want.
Absolutely. That is absolutely true. And for me, with the Borderlands, with Final Prayer, it did give me what I wanted. And, even if the absolute end, to some degree, it's like, well, it's the last 15 minutes. Where are we going to go? We're not going away.
Yeah.
We're going down into the church, down into the gullet, down into the, down into the worm. Oh shit, we went up the worm's butt. Oh no, what?
Yeah.
But there's a moment earlier that I think actually might have been more what Kermode was talking about when he said that there were moments where he was just like alone in the dark with his heart hammering. And that's the walk that Deacon takes across the field where, if nothing else, and I'm kind of surprised he never says this, if nothing else, I caught a ghost on tape 3 fucking times. Yeah. But yeah, he's like, he's going across the field in the dark, treading on cow shit, hearing every once in a while what seems like the trail of a voice.
Yeah.
And looking up, and it's there for like a microsecond, and then, where am I? Where have I wandered? What am I, it's like, what am I following? Should I go back? No, I have to go on. And a lot of that has to do with, I guess, the bass note of horror for me, of like, there's something almost Arthur Machen-like about the Borderlands. And that is not something that I say very often. Machen is a person that I think, like now we've done Lovecraft to death. I think people should move on to Machen. There's moments in the Borderlands that are almost white people like in their weirdness, their completely strangeness, where you're like, well, I've just wandered somewhere. I don't know. Yeah, is that grass? Are those bones? Are those rocks? Are the rocks talking to me? Is that flower over there singing?
Yeah. I just saw Ben Wheatley's film In the Earth a couple of weeks ago, and it is the very definition of, I should just not be here. Cinema.
Oh, I so want to see that.
Yeah, it's really good.
I'm desperate desperate to see that film.
Well, by the time this comes out, it will have made it to VOD.
Okay, good.
I think there's a way you could see it as a sequel to A Field in England, but you probably shouldn't. Like, that would bring up too much in the way of expectations. But there's a reference to something that happened in 1640, and you're just like, it's like 2 years early. Yeah, maybe it's the same mushrooms. I don't know. Maybe not. But it's very, very smart about what it does, and it does go into like the full-on experiential psychedelia again. And it's been a while since he's done that. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, super cool.
Yeah. So
horror always is about locating people on the ground inside of something that they know can't happen, and trying to describe it as though it can happen. Mm-hmm. And if it happened, what would it be like? What would you hear? What would you see? What would you smell? How would it feel, etc.? And yeah, there's a lot about the Borderlands that really captures everything that I want out of that kind of experience. And some of the stuff that I've done, I don't know how much of my stuff you got to read, but probably the three things that I'm most well known for are a short story that I wrote called The Emperor's Old Bones, a novella or novelette, I'd say novelette, that I wrote called, with my husband, actually, called Each Thing I Show You Is a Piece of My Death, and my novel experimental film. And in each of the latter two, there is a real attention paid towards trying to essentially make a found footage experience on the page, to describe haunted footage, to describe, what it's like to find something on the internet and pursue it and fall into a click hole that becomes one of those weird lacunae where you're like, should I be looking at this? Is this a good idea? I'm not absolutely certain. And, and some of that comes out of my background as a film critic, and the interest that I have in film, and particularly Canadian film, but a lot of it also comes out of just how immediate and almost corporeal the action of watching a film can be. You're completely rooted inside of your meat suit, looking out through the holes in your skull with your wet electricity charged brain going a mile a minute. And meanwhile, what are you looking at? You're looking at light on a wall. You're looking at something completely flat and completely not there, almost ghostly, but it's having an effect on you as if you were taking a drug or running a marathon or getting threatened in real life. And, that's something that I've always been interested in. I keep returning to it again and again and again. And in a lot of ways, I think that's what I find so fascinating about found footage movies.
Because you are there.
Yes, you are there. Yes. Yeah, exactly. You are there right now. You wish you weren't. Oh, God. Down the worm. Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think.
My thanks to Gemma Files, whose latest short story collection, In That Endlessness, Our End, was released earlier this year. You should also check out her 2015 novel, Experimental Film, which I'm only slightly disappointed to learn has nothing to do with the They Might Be Giants song. You can find Gemma on Twitter at Gemma Files, all one word, and you can find The Borderlands streaming on North America on Hoopla under the title Final Prayer. It's also streaming on Tubi in the US. It's also available on Apple TV and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I host the Now What podcast and I write the weekly Now Streaming newsletter, to which you can subscribe at nowtoronto.substack.com. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there. Stay home, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your shot if you can. I'll see you next time.